So, drama on the US border. Donald Trump continues to have trouble with the law and closing in on the debt limit deadline. It's a busy time in the United States. Joining me live is Professor of Political Science at Cypress College, Peter Matthews. Peter, we've heard lots this week about the expiry of the Title 42 border regulation in the US. What exactly is it and what changes now?
Title 42 was put in place during the COVID pandemic in order to make sure that people didn't come across and then bring in a lot of COVID to the United States. So it was very strictly enforced. It was very difficult for people to come in here and apply for asylum. And this time now it was expired last night actually, and Title 8 took its place. Title 8 allows people to apply for asylum, but they have to do it either online or actually get an appointment rather through looking at an app, or they also cannot apply for it if they have come through another country. They have to apply in the country that they first get to from their own country first. So it makes it harder to apply for asylum, but it does allow them to do so, and they get a hearing in the United States. So it's quite a problem, but this whole thing begins with big macroeconomic problems with free trade, like the NAFTA free trade agreement, which I believe really ended up hurting Mexico and the United States working class and middle class. And it encouraged more people to come here because they lost their jobs in Mexico, or they were paid very low wages by companies that went in there. We can discuss that in detail in just a bit if you want to.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how big a problem is the southern border? Because Donald Trump, the former president, was talking about a wall that many people sort of thought would never be built, and it hasn't been. But, you know, how big an issue is it? And is there any light at the end of the tunnel?
It is an issue, but the thing is, a wall is not going to stop the immigration because of the macroeconomic policies, as I said. With free trade, with not ensuring that there are higher wages in Mexico before we let Mexico into the NAFTA agreement, will people start flooding and coming across here, because NAFTA also allowed American farmers, agribusiness, to dump their low-priced corn on the Mexican market and drove out Mexican farmers from their farms. Let me give you an example. 2 million Mexican farmers lost their farms in the first several years of NAFTA. 2 million lost their farms. They went to the factories to work in companies like GM, which moved American factories here to Mexico and hired Mexican workers at $1 to $4 an hour, Tim. That's all. They were paying the same workers in the United States to make the same type of trucks, put them together. General Motors, for example, were paying $18 to $32 an hour to American workers here to build the same Silverado truck they were building in Mexico for $1 to $4 an hour. That really increased the poverty level in Mexico more, made people more desperate. But also Central Americans fleeing Central America, coming through Mexico. And those Central Americans are fleeing Central America because of the corruption and the violence. And quite often our US foreign policy was not adjusted well enough to be able to help people develop economies down there in places like Guatemala, for example. Instead, the US took the corporation side, not the worker side. And that was a real problem because it caused a lot of human rights violations, military takeovers, and the U.S. went along with that for a long time. So it's a long compounded problem from 30, 40, 50 years ago. It has to be addressed from the ground up and not just plastered over by some temporary solution. This is a big crisis at this point, of course.